I'm Viet, and I have a problem. What you just saw was me setting up my Warhammer 40k army. My collection consists of over 1,500 models, which were each individually assembled and hand-painted. So for those of you who aren't familiar with Warhammer, all of these models are from the Imperium of Man, which is the main human faction in Warhammer 40k. The Imperium of Man is a huge, galaxy-spanning empire, so you have a lot of variety you can choose from in just one army. The Imperial Guard is the main force in the Imperium. They number in the trillions and are just basically normal humans with laser rifles and World War I tanks that have to face all of the horrors of the galaxy, like giant space bugs and demons from another reality. This is why the Guard is my favorite army in the game. There's just something super cool about a normal dude fighting against everything the galaxy could possibly throw at him. Luckily though, the Imperial Guard are not alone. They're supported by dozens of other forces, like the genetically modified Space Marines, who are 9-foot tall superhumans with 2 hearts and 3 lungs. Their basic battle rifle shoots exploding missiles, and they're clad in some of the strongest armor in the galaxy. Sometimes though, even the Space Marines aren't enough, but the Imperium can call on the Titan Legions. The Titans are combat walkers that are dozens of stories high and carry weapons that are otherwise only seen on spaceships. So I was going to do an introduction about how I got into the hobby and everything, but honestly I don't really want to edit that much footage, so I'm just going to go straight into the armies. Fair warning though, this is my first time filming and editing a YouTube video by myself, so the rest of the video might suck. If you do watch the whole thing, please let me know in the comments how I can improve in the future. First up is the Armageddon Steel Legion. These guys are basically World War II Germans invading Poland, but in space. Every single infantry squad gets a Chimera armored transport, and they're supported by a fuck ton of Lehman Russ tanks. Their only strategy is Blitzkrieg. My Steel Legion force comes out to 6,695 points and has 158 infantry, 33 tanks, and 3 super heavy tanks. One day, GW will decide to re-release this army, but in plastic. Next up is my small force of Cadian shock troopers. These are your basic bitch Imperial Guard that everyone has. Every Cadian learns to shoot and clean a gun before they can even read and write. The Cadians used to garrison one of the largest and most important planets, but chaos blew it up. I've painted way too many Cadians in my life, so this army isn't too big and I don't plan to add to it in the future. So the Cadians are one of the most competent forces in the Imperial Guard. Pretty much every Imperial Guard army throughout the entire galaxy tries to be like them. This next army is the complete opposite. If you read his last command in the Gaunt's Ghost series, you know about the Dev Petra. They have super shiny silver tanks and pristine white and gold uniforms. They come from a super rich world and literally won't engage in combat because they're afraid of getting their tanks dirty. One of my favorite scenes from the Gaunt's Ghost series was when one of the commissars slaps the shit out of a Dev Petra officer that is retreating because his commander is something like the 7th son of some cousin of the planetary governor or something like that. I knew immediately after reading about the Dev Petra that I had to get an entire army of them. In the books they're using normal tanks like Hydras and Basilisks, but I gave them Malquadors so they can look even bougier. The Death Corps Krieg, the edgiest of all of the Imperial Guard. They're famous because they nuked their entire planet to stop a civil war. They have cool capes and gas masks and are basically just World War I soldiers in space. I finished painting most of the tanks for this army, except for a couple more Bane Blades, and I have 220 more infantry, for them that are halfway painted that I'll have to show in the next video. Next up are my Tempestus Scions. They are painted as Deltic Lions, which are stormtroopers specialized in fighting the corrupting forces of Nurgle. I use them as bodyguards for my Inquisitors because they look pretty menacing and they're black and red. The Grey Knights are Space Marines, but way cooler. They have one purpose and one purpose only, and that is to hunt down and destroy any and all demons. Every single Grey Knight has psychic powers and can resist being corrupted by chaos. In fact, they are the only Space Marine chapter that has never fallen to chaos. The Grey Knights are part of the Inquisition and thus have the authority to kill any other Imperial forces that they suspect to be corrupt. Oftentimes, they even kill guardsmen just for knowing that they exist. Moving on to some bigger models, House Cold Shroud. House Cold Shroud is for people that like the Legio Ignis paint scheme, but are too poor to afford real Titans. They actually don't know very much about their lore, except they follow the Legio Ignis around, and you can't play Titans in normal 40k, so I painted this army for the 2021 Las Vegas Open. Next is another yellow knight house. This one is House Hot Trout. They're also Imperial Knights and they're pretty generic. They will deploy alongside any force that requests their help. My Knight Errant for this army got featured in White Dwarf and that was pretty cool. Now for the biggest army in my collection, and surprise surprise, it's more Imperial Knights. This army currently has 54 suits and clocks in over 20,000 points. Unlike House Cold Shroud and House Hot Shroud, which are Imperial Knight houses, House Tyrannus is a Mechanicus Knight house, which means they work closely with the Martian tech priests, and in exchange they get cooler tech. At the end of the Great Crusade, House Tyrannus was one of the largest knight houses with over 600 suits, but after the Horus Heresy, there were only 2 left. In the current timeline of Warhammer 40k, they have rebuilt and are once again a pretty big knight house. Maybe one day I'll get to 100 models in this army. Alright, last Knight army. Can you tell that Knights are my favorite models? These green Knights are from House Vironi. They're special because they have emerald green armor, and I got to experiment using basically car paint to get their armor to be super reflective. I'm not really sure how much this shows up on video, but this was the army that I took to the 2023 LVO and got crushed horribly. Next up is the Inquisition. They're much like the Spanish Inquisition, but dialed to 11. They have the authority to commandeer entire armies and spaceships and speak with the authority of the Emperor. They can pretty much execute whoever they want, whenever they want. I've grouped a few random missing models in here that didn't fit with the other armies, and unfortunately I missed filming some of them. However, there is a Ultramarine, which was the first Space Marine and first Warhammer 40k model that I've ever painted. This next guard army is my own custom regiment, the Lazarian Storm. The Lazarian Storm are modeled after the Cadian shock troopers and are fighting a Necron uprising on their home world. I had a lot of the old Cadians and didn't want to paint another basic bitch scheme, so I had to make something else up. Basically, I just swapped the green for blue. I put together all of my old Cadian models in this army, so there's old metal Kasserkin and the old Forge World Hostile Environment troopers, and even a couple unreleased models. This Leagues of Votan army isn't actually mine, but I painted it for a very close friend, and they fit in just fine with everything. And there was a little empty spot on the table, so I had to find something else to put in there. I actually don't really know much about the Votan lore, but they're space dwarves, and they're mercenaries. Alright, moving on to the big boys. Legio Ignis, or the Warp Runners. If you've read Warhammer Community, you might have seen these guys since they've been featured on there before. The Legio Ignis is from the world of Lucius, which is one of the largest Mechanicus Foundry planets after Mars. For some reason, the Legio Ignis is the only Titan Legion that can teleport their multi-story tall Titans, complete with weapons, directly onto the battlefield. Other Titan Legions have to land their spaceships and spend weeks assembling their machines like peasants. So one Titan Maniple wasn't good enough, so I had to get a second one. This one is the Legio Ignis. I chose this color scheme purely because they match my red Dodge Challenger. The Warlord is named Demonium Eversor, and there are two Reavers named Rubrum Oculus and Felonus Hades. I'm really bad at pronouncing these. The two Warhounds are Apis Ultimae and Ignis Visparum, and yes, every single Titan is named after a type of Challenger. The Legio Ignis is from Mars and is one of the original 3 Titan legions from the Triad Ferrum Morgulus that were founded even before the Great Crusade during the Age of Strife. Next is my latest army in this collection, which isn't even finished. I ran out of pigment powders and forgot to paint the 2 tank commanders. This army is also from the Gonskos series, but unlike the incompetent Petra, the Normanian Armored is one of the few guard regiments in the entire Sabbath Worlds Crusade that can do anything correctly. I made this army entirely out of rescue tank models that now have a second chance after being badly painted and left in closets or attics over the last couple decades. Time for some more Imperial Guard, and although this one is technically a Solar Auxilia army. These are some of the coolest models in the 30k and 40k universe, since they're basically wearing 1950s dive suits as armor to board other spaceships. Some of them don't even carry guns, they only have axes. The Saturnine Rams are a Solar Auxilia army that fought during the Horus Heresy. The Solar Auxilia were basically the elite soldiers from the Imperial Army that had much better equipment that weren't Space Marines. In the current timeline, Saturn still exists, so I assume they're still sending out regiments of their famous rams. So I think that every 40k fan has seen the Astartes movie. After watching the series, I knew I had to get an entire army of Retributors, but since I hate short marines, I had to get all Primaris ones. Also, I have too many gray armies, so I had to add some green to the gray to make them stand out a little bit. I still need to paint 9 more repulsors for this army, as well as 2 Thunderhawks and a Stormbird. And a fun fact, this army has every Primaris Lieutenant model ever released. Last but not least, my favorite army, and it's another guard army, the Vostroyan Firstborn. These are basically space Cossacks, whatever, I can't pronounce anything, complete with their little furry hats. During the Horus Heresy, the lords of Australia were being little bitches and not sending soldiers to defend Terra, so after the war, Big Daddy Reboot Gilliman, Primarch of the Ultramarines, punished the entire planet by making the first child of every citizen, peasant or noble, to fight in the Imperial Guard in the worst war zone. That's why the Vostroyan are called the Firstborn, and their punishment will never end. Well, that was all the armies, so now let's look at some numbers. In total, there are 1,324 infantry, 218 vehicles, and 75 Lords of War. In total, that brings our final model count to 1,617 total models, coming in at 122,495 points with a $62,405 retail value. Alright, some channel updates to close out. First of all, if you watched to the end, thank you very much. I know this video isn't up to the standards that I would like it to be, or what we usually strive for here at the studio. For future videos, I've ordered a gimbal for the camera since the footage was pretty shaky and the auto stabilization does some weird things to the models sometimes. And I've been up for 3 days learning how to edit videos and I absolutely hate it. But that's mostly probably because I ran out of Jack Daniels. But luckily, I've hired a new editor, so hopefully the video quality goes up from here. For the next video, I'll give you guys a tour of our paint studio, and we're going to start filming that literally as soon as I get all the models back upstairs and put into their display cases. Expect that video to be out in about 2 weeks. And after that, we have a bunch of other cool videos coming up, like painting a Navy wing of 20 aircraft and a Demi Legio of 15 Titans. That's right, we're moving beyond Maniples to Demi Legios. And of course these are full size because we don't paint peasant scale Titans here. And I know I've been promising this for like 2 years now, but hopefully this time I can get videos out on this channel somewhat more consistently. And final thing, we're going to be back on Twitch. There's an entire room in the studio that's set up just for streaming. 2,000 of you guys have already watched the video of us setting up the army for this video, and that kind of support is amazing. And also, since you guys are probably tired of seeing me, a bunch of the other painters here will also be streaming. Rachel, who you might have seen from the Titan Battle video, will be painting her Chaos Knights, and our newest painter, Leia, will be demonstrating a bunch of beginner techniques. She's currently already streaming games and cosplay on Twitch as Leia Rose FTW if you want to give her a follow. Alright, that's it. Thanks for watching. Bye.